My name is James Bagan. I'm an operating partner for Frog Capital, and I'm also a chair of a number of B2B tech outfits.
Thank you. And how did you get into what you do now? What got you here?
I'll try and do it concisely, and I'll do my best to keep to the facts. I mean, I have to be honest, it's a combination of accident and design. The first part of my career is pretty standard, pretty conventional. I was a tech sales guy for a South London software business that was acquired by Experian. And then I got poached into a sales leadership role for a private equity backed business in 2004. And one thing or another, I ended up running that business and ultimately sold it in 2006. And the same private equity firm invited me to run another one of their businesses in 2007. And I ran that business for 3 years, sold it in 2010. And after my earnout, I then started working directly with the private equity firm Living Bridge, who I'm sure you'll know, as their first operating partner. I worked there for several years. It's there where I developed a sales due diligence offering in my own advisory firm and started doing more and more work for multiple investors, particularly in the UK. And that's really where I settled on this advisory gig, if you like, working with investors to try and help them get the best out of their sales and marketing operations. And in recent years, well, it's grown arms and legs slightly in the sense that I'm now actually investing, particularly through the Frog Capital VC funds, and as I said, an operating partner for them, advisor for a few other funds, and I'm also and have been a chair for several technology outfits, some of which have since exited, which is great.
12 or 13 years ago, being an operating partner at Living Bridge, I'm guessing that was quite new back then?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, it's fascinating actually. The last couple of years has seen a plethora of people hit the market, ex-revenue leaders who want to be GTM experts or move into an advisory role or get plural careers or have more control over their time, which I completely understand. And I've ended up having a lot of these people come to me asking for some insights, because a lot of investors who get asked this question by their revenue leaders who want to go in this direction will say, oh, you should speak to James Bagan because he's been doing this a while. And I don't know many other people who've been doing it as long as me. So whilst I cannot profess to be, I was never the best sales guy and I'm certainly not the best GTM advisor, I've definitely been doing it a long time. And I think the advantage that gives you, Will, is not only having a decent understanding of what good, bad and indifferent looks like in your commercial operations, but also I've worked across now 2 seismic financial reverses, one in 2008 and then one in 2022. And those experiences, the span of those experiences, I think, if I may be presumptuous for a moment, have been very useful for my CEOs and my CROs who I work with on a daily basis.
Yeah. And your sales forensics business, do you still spend much time? Is that still an important part of your life?
Yeah, well, it's my main invoicing vehicle. So when I started out, when I came out of being a CEO and then went into being an operating partner, I had to have a limited business just to process my invoices. So initially, if I'm really honest, Will, it was something that just had to be done as you move into that consultancy world. But it's really interesting actually now that the sales DD offering that I developed initially at Living Bridge, I've done that nearly 200 times now across businesses in Europe, Asia, the US, and that product, that service has now almost, I don't want to get too carried away here, but it's almost developed a brand of its own. I have people contacting me asking for the sales forensics due diligence service, unknowing that it's just me. There's no one else. It is just me. So it is an important part of my life in terms of processing invoices and paying dividends. At heart, I guess I'm a contracting consultant. I'm an advisor, so I work with businesses and investors in the way in which it's easiest for them to contract with me, whether that means going on the payroll, whether that means doing it as a time materials day rate or as an investing operating partner, as I am at Frog.
Interesting. What's the most challenging part of what you do now then?
I think there's a number of challenges, clearly. No one ever calls me when things are going right. No one ever calls me to say, hey, we're smashing it at 60% growth a year. Can we get out to 65? It just doesn't happen. People call you when there's a fire, when something's gone wrong and somebody's left or somebody's been fired or a key customer has wandered off or revenues aren't tracking to plans. That's why you get in contact with someone like me. I wish the dynamic was different. It'd be nice to have a few layups, but it just doesn't work like that in reality. So I say the initial challenge, Will, is around assessment. What's the problem? The great quote about, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice, something that I think about every day. Before you can start to map out a remedy, you have to understand what the problem is. what are the root causes? Where does it originate? Is it in a person? Is it in a process? Is it in a proposition? What is the actual problem or problems that we're having to try and manage? And I find that quite challenging, if I'm honest, especially when you're going in and doing an assessment with a business, because if you speak to multiple people, you're going to get multiple perspectives, multiple inflections. You're going to get different views on the whys and wherefores of what the issue actually is, and sort of cutting through all of that noise and being 100% sure that you've got the problem, you've got the challenge. I think initially for me is the first hurdle to overcome.
So how do you cut through then? How do you go about diagnosing the GTM function? So, I mean, you could probably talk for an hour or 2 hours about that, but where do you start? Where do you look first?
The key is, for me, it has to be evidential. That's not to say that you would ignore individual opinions. You should absolutely listen to those. So let's keep it nice and simple. Let's say the CRO is saying that the quality and quantity of leads within from the marketing operation, from his marketing colleagues, isn't delivering. A pretty common refrain from a sales leader, I would say. I'm sure I've used it myself in the past. The trick then is to actually go into the marketing operation. Don't ignore it, but go into the marketing operation, speak to the marketers and try to understand what plan actually have they got deployed on the ground. Is it properly resourced? Do we have the right financial backing for it? Are the metrics and measures appropriate? Is the target market, are the ICPs sensible and attentive? Are they interested in what you're actually selling? Do the campaigns and motions that the marketing team put together, are they effective? Are they working? And that will be done through interviews, obviously structured interviews with the stakeholders on the business side. But I also make sure that I collect a data room, as you would in a proper due diligence process. I create a data room so that I have access to all of the materials. I'm able then to cross-reference or cross-match what people are telling me with what I'm actually seeing in processes, papers, and project plans that are actually being used on a day-by-day basis, and try, if I can, to look for consistencies and inconsistencies. So if the sales lead is telling me one thing, the marketing lead is telling me another thing, speak to the COO, speak to the CEO, speak to the CFO, and try and triangulate that information so that you can understand precisely where the issue is. What I also try and do, which I think provides a really rich experience when you're doing assessment, is speak to third parties. So speak to partners, speak to customers, speak to lost customers or lost prospects, and again, validate and verify the information you've been told by the business there. And also, one of the other things that I try and do is I get a nice representative sample of stakeholder interviews. So I speak to senior people, obviously, because they're usually the people who've initiated the funding round or the due diligence process itself, the assessment. But also speak to the SDRs, speak to people who've been in the business 2 or 3 months, people who, still in that honeymoon period. Yeah, well, because when you speak to junior people, often they don't have that streetwise aspect to sharing information. So you sometimes get nuggets from people who've just arrived on the ground. So I'll often hear from, I'll speak to sales leaders and say, oh, I've got this fantastic reporting framework in place, and I speak to everybody on a daily basis, formally, weekly. We've got all of these dashboards, we've got all of these reports. I meet my guys, I'm diligent, I'm rigorous. And then you speak to the salespeople themselves, and like, well, yes, he says all that, but he's often backing out of the one-to-ones. He doesn't always turn up to the sales meetings. Sometimes it's a bit of a talking shop. So you go down a level, Will. You go down right into the weeds, into the nitty-gritty to find out what is actually happening on a day-by-day basis.
The sniff test.
Initially, it's a sniff test because, again, you've got multiple senses. Use them all.
Yes.
I do follow my nose. I definitely do. And I think, I've been doing this over 30 years now, so I think my nose is pretty good. Yep. But I go back to what I said when I answered your question initially. You've got to back that up with evidence and with data. In fact, that's one aspect of the industry that I'm really pleased to see mature and develop recently, is the reliance or the adoption of more and more information, more and more data in decision on revenue decision.
So some of the biggest lessons you've learned?
Oh my goodness, a lot of them. And in fact, perhaps maybe I'm no different from anyone else here, the most memorable ones have also been the most painful ones.
Yes.
I hate to be trite here, but I'm going to be. As a young, I was a CEO in my early 30s and a selling CEO at best. I just hadn't initially understood the criticality of the numbers. So I understood numbers from a sales level. I understood how to build a business case and a proposal or a quote. I understood what that meant to my sales target and my comp plan, obviously. But I hadn't understood what that really meant in terms of running a business. Of all of the different financial levers that one has to think about when you're running a business, the most important one, unfortunately for me, was also the one that I hadn't fully grasped, and that was cash. So that was a real lesson for me. My first exit went really well. It was just a crackerjack deal for everybody concerned. We didn't have any cash issues. My second business, running an organization in 2007, 8, 9, in the big financial crisis. a crash at that point. We had customers wandering off left, right, and centre. We had big customers just arbitrarily increasing their payment terms from 30 days to 120 days because they were big and they could, and there was nothing we could do about it. And we were running out of money and having to lay people off, having to go down to 50% salary, which I did for years, foregoing bonuses, all the rest of it, because I hadn't taken action quickly enough around preserving cash. Now let's just roll forward, Will, to what's just happened in the past 18 months, say, or
Yes.
since the start of the war in Ukraine. Money's got more expensive. Money just has got more expensive. VCs are hanging on to their cash and are not fueling this sort of growth at all costs mantra that was doing the rounds a couple of years ago, and therefore there just is less money. There's less money around. It's been hard to get access to money, and it's been hard to the salespeople to close deals and also get properly remitted. So it's been really, really challenging, and I'm really grateful that, well, I say grateful, I wasn't at the time, but I'm grateful that I went through that experience in 2008-9 because I've been able to apply those lessons. More recently, a couple of years since 22, as a north of 50 chair, I've been able to say to my 30-something CEOs, we need to get on this now. Not next week, not next month or next quarter. We need to get on this now. I think perhaps that's been the biggest challenge. I think from a sales perspective, the biggest lesson for me, and I wouldn't call it a challenge as much, is just more the understanding that sales is an iterative activity. It's a series of consequential steps. It's a process. There are different processes for different businesses and different sales and different customers, of course. Yep. But learning that early on in my career, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, was pivotal, because I think I'd got into sales thinking it was just the most talkative man, usually the most talkative man with the biggest personality in the room was likely to be the most successful salesperson, and that's just not the case. Nice. You know, I know a lot of shy, insular, introspective, humble, successful salespeople, and these people rely on graft, hard work, and proper process. I think that for me was a challenge initially, but it's actually now become my biggest strength.
So developing that reverse engineered chain of metrics, tweaking the conversion rates, but also just putting all the effort and the activity in at the top of the hopper combination, isn't it?
Yeah, I've seen, well, I mean, again, you'll have probably noticed this in your world, that the amount of turnover of sales leaders in a downturn, so in the last couple of years, is really high. And I'm not absolutely convinced that just getting rid of the VP of sales or the CRO is the right answer. I'm not saying it's not the answer, but I'm just saying, again, sort of maybe conflating a couple of points I've made now, is the trick is to get into the weeds and find out actually what the problem is. Could anyone have turned this situation around? Could anyone have delivered the growth rate that the board insisted in their plan when they set it a year previous? Understanding whether the business has actually given the sales leader the right level of support to be able to deliver an achievable plan. And that's why, again, the understanding of the metrics, the measures, the numbers is so important. I can't tell you how many times over the past, particularly the past 18 months, Will, where I've gone in, where, as I said, there's a fire, there's a problem. I've spoken to the CRO. They're telling me these are experienced, able people who have got the backing of their peers and also their reports. And it's not happening for whatever reason. And they're tearing their hair out saying, I don't know why, I just can't deliver these growth numbers. And you actually get into it and you find out that there's a completely different problem under the hood. Often I found that the plan actually that was put together was just not achievable. One of the mistakes that I made as a sales leader back in the day was just blindly accepting numbers that were being passed down to me by CEOs and boards. Fortunately, as you get a bit older, one of the things that you get with one of the benefits you get is a little bit more self-confidence and a little bit more wherewithal to be able to stand your ground and say, I'm not signing up to this plan. But I think when you're 30 and indestructible and feel you can do anything and don't have that, perhaps that gumption, that self-confidence, you roll with it. And then you get 6 months into the year and suddenly you realize you're behind the 8 ball and there's nothing you can do about it.
I think the mindset, you know, having been in a similar position myself, is that you feel like you don't have the choice, actually.
Yeah.
But the irony here is the way that you offer more value is by pushing back and is by sharing and is by, you know, demonstrating an understanding of the opportunity so that, you know, you don't spend the entire year chasing the number along with everybody else.
It's hard. And obviously, you know, the two of us sitting here with years of experience behind us can say that we know that's the right thing to do. But standing up to a board or a chair or a CEO and saying, no, I think you're wrong. I think this is the wrong path for the business to take. I don't agree and I'm not signing up to it. That's a hell of a call for someone in, you know, at the start of their career or who's just trying to get on that ladder up to wherever they want to be. And I know that to be true because I've definitely been that person. But what I try and do now as an investor, what I try and do now as a chair is really, really encourage people to speak freely. Yeah. You know, you do it politely, you do it with respect, of course. But please, I would much rather that you and I disagree with this vehemently if required in a board meeting or in a planning meeting than you blindly accept what I'm telling you and then walk out the room and tell the first person you see, oh God, I've just been railroaded. No, I'm paying you for your judgment. One of my chairs used to say that to me all the time. I'm paying you to tell me what you think. I know what I think. I've just told you. Tell me what you think. And I may not agree with you, and I may actually disregard your perspective, but that doesn't change the fact that I want you to tell me what you think. I think it's one of the challenges you get as a salesperson, because you learn all these things. I don't know if you had this, but when you start out on the road, all these little tricks and tips, like sandbagging, for example, on monthly and quarterly deals, because you've got a higher commission rate coming. Or I used to do that kind of thing all the time. Or I would lowball my forecasts and then come in sort of the end of the month and then the quarter, sort of hail the conquering hero. Look, I've smashed it. And I used to think that was the right way to behave. And then eventually, as you get older and you're running a business, and the CFO comes in and says, look, if you keep behaving like this, I can't plan properly. You're giving me the wrong information. Tell me what you think. I'm paying you for your judgment.
I can understand, though. I mean, a number of times, I mean, particularly in public companies where consistency seems to be really important. So, you know, when working with previous sales leaders myself, having some consistency seemed to be almost an objective in its own right, which is, as opposed to just, particularly in a subs business, right, where you just want to, you know, as the business which just wants the revenue, and you know, they've got sales leaders holding back, sandbagging.
Yeah.
Because they know that if they have a really big quarter, or they don't know, but they fear that the following quarter or the following year, they're going to be expected to do the same and more. When you think then of some of the best revenue leaders that you've worked with, what do you think has made them so successful?
I don't think it's any one thing. I think if it was your job, my job would be dead easy. We would just go out and look for that characteristic or quality or whatever it was and say, yep, we found the candidate. I don't think it's any one thing. I think every situation and circumstance, or every business, or every moment, you know, requires a different lens perhaps. But I think there are some things that maybe not absolutes, but sort of common denominators in the successful people that I've worked with. I think from a skill set perspective, being awesome at hiring is the number one for me.
Really?
Absolutely. Number one. And I've hired so many sort of super sales heroes. These individuals come in and try and sort of swoop in and try and close all the big deals and overreach a little bit into, or a lot into, their sales operation. No one actually ever learns anything. There's no proper process here because they're just so gifted or able, or they've got a bigger black book or whatever it is. They're able just to get these deals done. But that is, for me as an investor, is an inhibitor to scale up, because you're not allowing that machine to build. If you want to scale a business, then you have to find someone who is able to build and drive a team. And I think, again, drawing on my own lessons, Will, I was terrible at recruitment. I saw it as an imposition. I saw it as something that was getting in the way of my day. You know, I would look at my diary and say, oh, I've got 4 interviews today. Damn, you know, I'm not actually doing any proper work. It's fortunately for me, again, it was a lesson I learned quite a while back, when I realized that the only way in which I was going to be successful, the only way in which I was going to properly scale my business, is by bringing in better quality people around me and beneath me. I then embraced the sort of head and heart approach to recruitment, making sure that, you know, I was properly devoted, if you like, to the process of recruitment. So making sure that people like you had a full and proper brief, a brief that we were constantly going back to, tinkering if we needed to, but you understood not just the skill set of the people that I wanted, but also the qualities and characteristics, and making sure that was inclusive, speaking to other people around the business. So we built that sort of pen portrait of the individual that we wanted in the organization. And then when you actually get into the recruitment process, making sure that you're properly prepared, you do your research, you look at LinkedIn, you look at CVs, you get information reference checked properly. LinkedIn's fabulous, isn't it? Because you're usually able to find somebody, a second or third connection, who's worked with that person before, speak to them, get that impartial third-party feedback. Make sure that when you're sitting down in an interview, you've got a purpose, you've got a structure, you've got your questions laid out. Listen, as I say, be rigorous through the conversation. I found loop interviewing to be very, very useful recently, where, you know, you're then speaking to different members of your team who are looking at different aspects of the individual and the role. I'm getting a bit carried away now, but that sort of, the mindset here is being dedicated to the art and science of recruiting better is, for me, the number one skill set. In terms of characteristic, Will, I would say resilience, and I'd say that about CEOs as well. You know, in a scale up business, the ability to just keep getting back up, it's, I mean, especially in the last couple of years, but you've got to have, again, this is something that's difficult to train. You can definitely build it up over time. One of the training outfits I work with, the gazing guys, talk about mindset being a muscle. You know, it's not just an innate quality, it's something that your environment and your background and your upbringing, that's all part of it, but it's something you can develop. It's something that you can nurture. But having something in your belly that means that you're just not going to let the latest setback defeat you is huge. It's massive, because there have been so many difficulties for business leaders and salespeople particularly over the last couple of years, and being able to look to your right and seeing that the leader is, maybe at home they're having a moment and nursing a beer in the evening thinking, oh my god, how the hell am I going to get over this, but in the office, on the calls, they're just a tower of strength. And I feel that is something that the rest of the team can draw confidence and comfort from. So yeah, that internal resilience, but also that external strength that people can feed off, I think is, for me, the most important characteristic. There's clearly other things, empathy and active listening.
And we've built a framework for skills and behaviours, having partnered with Savile actually. But you'll be pleased to know that the first pillar in the skills framework is hiring. So we're aligned.
I don't remember ever having been trained how to hire.
No.
I'm fairly sure I was a sales leader at 27, 28, and immediately had to go out and hire 5 people. And I was literally, it was the recruitment manager in the firm gave me 5 CVs and said, right, you need to interview these people. And I'd been interviewed before, but never had interviewed anyone. And no one ever, until years later, I was sat down by somebody and said, look, this is a function, this is a discipline, this is a process, this is something that you need, as I say, I'm repeating myself, you need to prepare for, you can get better at, you need to have it structured. And hopefully what it does is it starts to squeeze out and eliminate the risks of you making the wrong decisions. And I'm super grateful for that, because it just means you get better quality, more appropriate personality types into your businesses, which is what we're trying to do. We're just trying to build out a group of better people.
So on that, building on what we've just spoken about, what would be your advice then for building a high-performing team?
I think clearly that has to be the first part, is that willingness to hire people better than you, people more able than you, people more experienced than you, people with different skill sets and experiences. Diversity, I think, is enormously important. Diversity of experience and thought.
Yeah.
There's the more classical interpretations of diversity. And most of the diverse teams that I work with, I think, have far better outcomes, far better decisions than not. That sort of groupthink mentality. But yeah, so clearly having that mindset around hiring is critical. I think culture is extremely important. I encourage all of my sales leaders to try to write down, I think the discipline of writing down what kind of standards and behaviors you expect of yourself and your people, I think is a really useful exercise. So I ask it all the time when I'm doing due diligence. I'll say, what adjectives would you use to describe the characteristics of your team? And what I'll do is I'll speak to the CRO, I'll speak to the CEO, then I'll speak to the salespeople. And it's interesting, if there are inconsistencies in the words that you use, that then is an amber, maybe even a red light. So I try to get sales leaders to think long and hard about actually what kind of operation you're trying to build here. What are the daily behaviors that you want to be seeing from your people? Whether it's about being massively customer centric, whether it's about being super responsive, whether it's about being really detailed and diligent, whatever it is. I accept there are different flavors and colors of sales operations, but that leader, I think, having that clear in their own mind, not only does it help brief people like you so that they can find the right candidates for the business, but I think it also helps them manage the organization on a daily basis. When you join, this is how I described the team that you were joining and how I wanted you to adapt to that. You're doing that, that's brilliant. You're not doing that, let's work on that. I think having that clarity around culture and standards and expectations, I think, is super important. I think for a scale-up business, hiring behind demand, I think is critical. What we've been unpicking over the last couple of years as advisors is that there was just way too much hiring on a punt. So I think people were dropping products into the market. They were getting what they thought sensibly was product market fit, and then putting in 7 SDRs and 4 AEs and just expecting the numbers to flow. I'm encouraging a lot of the sales leaders that I work with, whether they're pure play sales leaders or revenue leaders across a consolidated operation, make sure that top of the funnel piece is working, whether you call it marketing or PLG or channel-led growth or whatever it is, or all of those things, customer success, whatever it is, making sure that we've got a pipeline of sufficient quality and quantity. Then build your revenue model on that. The Winning by Design guys, I think, are excellent at this, which then helps you extrapolate the number of resources that you want. So absolutely bring salespeople into your organization, but make sure you've got evidential demand that would support the hiring of that team, because it's so painful when you then have to unravel that at a later date. And I think a couple of little things I think for sales leaders to think about is don't neglect customer success and partners. In fact, embrace it. So I think, again, I'm a new business direct sales guy by stock and trade, I guess, but understanding in the world of SaaS that a lot of your profit comes in subsequent years. So you have to have that sort of recurring revenue requires recurring impact approach, attitude. So don't neglect your customers. Make sure that we've got them locked into long-term contracts, making sure that they're getting value from those contracts, but also making sure that you're having upfront conversations about where else you can help them across organizations. And I think with the partners piece, businesses now that don't have a channel strategy, it's not a red flag, but there's an eyebrow raised, because I'm seeing more and more business going through the different flavors of partners, resellers or distributors or integrators or consultancies. Does your market support a channel strategy? Yes, it does. Well, then why haven't you got one? That helps then spread the risk, Will.
Yeah.
You're not just relying on marketing, you're not just relying on outbound sales, but you've got existing customers, you've got partners, you've got a wider gamut of routes to market.
So James, lastly, and thank you, where do you were talking 200 pieces of sales due deal, you're talking 30 years. So where do you get your inspiration from now? And I'm thinking, is it people? Is it mentors? Is it podcasts? Is it exercise? Where do you go for a bit of inspiration these days, James?
Oh, goodness. A lot of places. Very different than when I started. I mean, when I started, It was very mercenary. I was broke. I needed money. And selling seemed to me to be the quickest route from where I was to where I needed to be, get my parents off my back. So I think in those early days, I was very money motivated, very coin operated. As you get a little bit more financially secure and then start a family, obviously motivations change dramatically when you've got kids, and now at a stage where we're looking at universities and colleges, and so still money motivated, but not for myself perhaps. But in terms of drawing inspiration, like you, I'm a Liverpool fan, I'm a massive sports fan. Sports is the one thing I think in my life that I devote an awful lot of my spare time to. My dad was a massive football fan, but he loved all sports and he gave that to me. And as I was saying to you earlier, I can happily spend a Sunday on a sofa watching, flicking from golf to rugby to football to cricket, and I'll be a very, very happy man. And my kids will come downstairs and go, "Oh, Dad, Sky Sports is on again." I just leave me to. I'm very happy. So, from a sporting perspective, all over the place. I'm a huge fan of Alex Ferguson and Jurgen Klopp, drawing inspiration and lessons from how they've built winning teams, how they've built iterations of winning teams as well, particularly Ferguson.
Yes.
I'm not a United fan, but what he did for such a long period of time, I think, is remarkable. Sports stars like Tiger Woods as well, particularly, I think, again, it's the span of achievement. You were talking earlier about consistency, to be able to keep delivering and, having won a major on a broken leg and then winning the Masters after he's back. I mean, just astonishing. But yeah, sport hugely. I love playing golf. I'm rubbish at it, but I love playing golf. I love riding my bike. For me, getting out on my bike out into the open air, spending a few hours just on my own, clearing my head, thinking about things, taking in nature and the countryside, I think is enormously inspirational. I do read the odd business book, I have to be honest. I do. I'm not an avid business book reader, but I definitely, if the people that I trust and know well make a recommendation, I'll definitely do it. One of the great things we got at Frog is like an open library. Mike Reed, the founder at Frog, encourages us all to take a book, read it, review it, share it online, and then if you come to Frog, I know you've been to Frog, but if you come to Frog, you can take away any of the books in the library and read them. So I think it's a really nice idea. So a recent recommendation from me would be Shoe Dog, about the story of Nike, a remarkable Phil Knight, I think it is, the starter of Nike, and his story of how he built that business up. And it's a combination again of resilience and passion and devotion, but also some tragedy in there as well, and how he built one of the biggest brands in human history. So yeah, there you go. A few from me.
I've just completed the book Rise, Kiyosaki. There's one for you if you've not read that one.
I'm a chair of a South African business, so we get reminded on a weekly business about how great the Boks are. He's an amazing character. You map his journey from where he came from in townships to where he is now. Not just what an awesome rugby player he is, but what a role model he is for the whole country. It's inspiring.
Thank you, James. That was excellent, highly relevant, and a lot of the topics you just discussed certainly resonate with me and will resonate with our audience as well. Appreciate you taking the time to chat this morning.